All right, standard 8.4 is plugging in a number, substituting a number in to an expression, and then following order of operations. So it's really order of operations, except now we need to substitute the numbers in. One important thing here is that we want to plug the numbers in parentheses so that when it is multiplication, it stays multiplication. This is a perfect example of this. X times y, we want to make sure that stays as multiplication. Another good trick to this, especially when we have fractions like we have here, I would change those to decimals right away before you even plug them in. Okay? So let's start off by doing that. Our first step is just plugging numbers in. Y is 6, so I'm going to put that in parentheses. 6 minus x. It's really the exact same thing as negative 0.5, so that's how I'm going to plug it in. Negative 0.5 times 6, close that parentheses, and then divided by, again, 6. Alright, so we're trying to follow order of operations. We see a bunch of parentheses. Inside of this grouping symbol, inside of that set of parentheses, we see that we have subtraction and multiplication. We're going to do that multiplication first. So that'll keep this as a 6. Since that's not being multiplied times anything, I just drop those parentheses. Minus 0.5, negative 0.5 times 6 is negative 3. Alright, so I don't have parentheses there anymore because I knew I wasn't going to be using them. I know I don't really need them there. Kind of the same thing for this next part, divided by 6. That doesn't really need parentheses. It's not being multiplied times anything. Really, the specific times when we need it is for multiplication and for exponents. Those two times we absolutely need it, especially when it's a negative number. We're still working inside the parentheses here, so we're going to do this subtraction. That's really addition now. Subtracting a negative, it's really the same thing as adding a good thing. Subtracting a bad thing and adding a good thing are the same thing. Still working inside the parentheses. We're going to finish that out by getting 9, and then 9 divided by 6 is going to give us a decimal, 1.5. Or if you see an answer as a fraction, that would be 3 halves, 3 over 2. Alright, with number 2, we want to start off the exact same way. We want to change that fraction into a decimal. We'd rather work with 0.75 instead of 3/4. So we're going to take those 3 numbers now, plug them into the expression. Again, we're going to plug them in inside parentheses. It doesn't matter so much on that first one, but when we get to multiplication or exponents, it really does matter. So every number that we have, we're going to plug those in parentheses. And again, I changed that 3/4 to a 0.75. Alright, so now we're going to follow order of operations. We're going to work on the inside parentheses. The square root is actually also a grouping symbol. We have 2 grouping symbols there. We have the square root and the parentheses. We're going to do those problems completely separate and then do the subtraction in the middle. Alright, so I'm going to do the square root of 4 first. We have that negative sign in front. So we're going to keep that in front. It's negative 2 minus whatever we get from the parentheses. I'm going to start with the fraction part of that parentheses. I'm going to multiply the top out. 0.75 times negative 5 is negative 3.75 divided by 0.75. That number, that would actually change it back to negative 5. So we'll keep the first part the same. 4 times negative 5 minus negative 5. I'm going to erase this to give myself some room. And continue working inside the parentheses. That's our only grouping symbol left. So we have multiplication and we have subtraction. We're going to do that multiplication first. We have negative 2 minus down negative 20 minus negative 5. We're going to finish the work on the parentheses by doing that subtraction. The only thing left in there, it's subtracting a negative. That's the same thing as adding a positive. Subtracting a bad thing is the same thing as adding a good thing. So it's negative 20 plus 5, that's negative 15. So our final step is the subtraction again. Again, we're subtracting negative, it's really plus a positive. That gives us a final answer of 13. On number 3, they're giving us an equation, I equals P times R times T. That's used to find the interest, which is I. That's charged on a principal loan amount, which is called P, over time, which is called T, and with an interest rate of R. Alright, so those are our 4 numbers. We have I, P, R, and T. Those are really our 4 variables. We're hoping to get 4 numbers for those. We want to know what the amount of interest is, the amount of interest earned That's our question. We don't know that yet. With a principal loan amount of 650, a time of 3.5 years. I'm going to change that right away to a decimal, 3.5 years, and an interest rate of 1.5%. There's a part that I skipped over in there that's really important. R is in decimal form. So R is 1.5%, but we need that in decimal form. We're going to change the decimal place. We're going to move it 2 places. We're going to divide that by 100. We'll move the decimal place 2 places. That's really 0.015. We want to find interest. We want to find the I. We have P, we have R and T. To find I, really just multiply those 3 numbers together. P times R times T, or 650 times 0.015 times 3.5. All right, when we multiply those out, we get 34.125. That's really not a dollar amount, so we don't want to just leave it like that. We want to leave it with pennies, rounded to pennies. That's really $34.13. All right, and this last one, we're using that exact same equation from problem 3. We're asked how long, that's a question of time. We don't know what time is. Would a principal loan amount of 4,000 P equaling 4,000 need to be invested? How long does that need to be invested at an interest rate, an R, of 5% to earn an interest of 800? So I here is actually 800. Need to make sure we change that into a decimal. Make sure we do that every time. Can't put it in as a percent. We're going to put that in as a decimal, 0.05. And we're just going to plug into this equation. I equals PRT. The only difference between this one and the last one is now we're given the interest and we're working backwards to one of the 3 on the right side, one of the P, R, and T. We're working backwards to this T. All right, so here we're given 800 as the interest, 4,000 as the principal, and 5% or 0.05 as our rate, as our interest rate. And so we're trying to solve for T here. We need to get rid of the 2 things that are attached to this. First thing I would do is just multiply those 2 together to make it into one number. So this is really 800, and that equals 8T. All right, that's just multiplying these 2 numbers together. This is not right. All right, so when we multiply those two out, we get the number 200. So this is now 800 equals 200 times t. All right, our last step is to actually solve for this t. We're going to divide by 200 on both sides. Remember, that's multiplication. This is just an equation. That's multiplication. To undo that, we do the opposite operation, which is division. We divide by 200 on both sides, and t is 4. What that really means is that it's going to take 4 years to earn $800 in interest at a 5% interest rate, starting out with $4,000. That means in 4 years, we'll have that much money in the account instead of just $4,000.